and welcome to 5-Minute Family Law. In today's episode, I'm going to provide an overview of spousal support in British Columbia. Future episodes will get into the details in a lot more depth, but today I'm just going to provide a quick introduction. So, spousal support is available to anybody who qualifies as a spouse. And you'll remember from one of the previous episodes that you can be a spouse in one of three ways. You have been legally married to someone else. You lived with someone in a marriage-like relationship for at least 2 years, or you lived with someone in a marriage-like relationship for less than 2 years, but you've had a child with that person. So as long as you qualify as a married spouse or an unmarried spouse, you can ask for support. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you can ask. People who are married spouses can ask for spousal support under the Divorce Act or under the Family Law Act. If you are an unmarried spouse, and those are the people that live together in a marriage-like relationship, you can only ask for support under the Family Law Act. There are 3 reasons why you might be entitled to get spousal support. This is important because as a spouse, you're entitled to ask, but you have to go to that second stage and prove that you're also entitled to get. So those 3 grounds are contractual. You and your spouse have signed a family law agreement, usually a separation agreement, but could also be a cohabitation agreement or a marriage agreement that says that you're going to be entitled to receive spousal support. Secondly, you could be entitled to receive spousal support on compensatory grounds, or thirdly, you could be entitled to receive spousal support on non-compensatory grounds. That first head of entitlement having to do with the family law agreement is pretty obvious, and I'm not going to get into it, but I'm going to talk about the other 2 in a little more detail. The idea behind a compensatory entitlement to support is that the reason why you're receiving spousal support is to compensate you for the financial effects of the decisions that you and your spouse made during the relationship. Let me give you a super easy example. Let's say you and your spouse have had a child, and you both agree that you're going to stay at home and raise the child. While that is a totally awesome decision and the family has the benefit of you staying at home to raise your child, there are financial effects that aren't so good. So firstly, your spouse is staying in the workforce, which means that they have the opportunity for raises, promotions, and advancements. It also means that their income is what's meeting the family's day-to-day living expenses. For you, on the other hand, if you're the stay-at-home spouse, it means that your career has gone on pause. You have stopped working outside the home. You don't have the same opportunities for raises, promotions, and advancements. And at the end of the relationship, for example, you've been out of the workforce for 8 years, which means that you have that huge gap on your resume, while your spouse has remained fully engaged in the workforce and is still employed. For you to get back into the workforce, you're probably not going to be able to restart at the same position that you held before you left the workforce. You're going to have to explain to employers about what you were doing during those 8 years, how you kept current, how you kept your skills up, and either way, you're going to be starting probably at a more junior position going back to work than you were at when you left. To take another example, your spouse gets a really great job in Halifax, and so you agree that you're going to leave your fantastic, well-paying job in Prince George and go across the country to live with your spouse in Halifax. Well, that's great because, your spouse has got this dream job and they're probably making more money and things like that. It's all good. You, on the other hand, you've left whatever career that you had in British Columbia and you've had to leave that all behind you. And you may not be able to get similar work or similar paying work in Halifax as you had in Prince George. So the idea with compensatory support is that the support is being paid to compensate the recipient for the negative financial effects of the decisions the spouses made during the relationship. The goal is to more or less restore you to the position you would have been in had it not been for the decisions that you made during your relationship. Now, non-compensatory support is a bit easier. The idea there is that someone, as a result of the end of the relationship, is in need, and the other person has the financial ability to pay. So, the reality about leaving a relationship is that during your relationship, you had one income, maybe two incomes that paid one rent, one mortgage payment, one hydro bill, one gas bill, one set of cell phone bills, and all the rest. But when the relationship comes to an end, you've got two incomes that are struggling to pay for two mortgages, two rents, two gas bills, two electricity bills, and so on and so forth. The reality is that living together is cost effective, whether you're living together and paying for your needs with one income or with two incomes. As a result, after separating, it can be difficult sometimes for one of the two spouses to get by. And so if they have the financial need and the other spouse has the ability to pay it, spousal support will likely be ordered. Each of these two kinds of spousal support have different implications. So remember how compensatory support is about compensating someone for the decisions made during a relationship and the negative effect those decisions had on someone's financial circumstances. What that means is that when the recipient spouse gets a new job, their entitlement isn't necessarily extinguished. They could also remarry, and that doesn't extinguish their entitlement to get support, because the fact of their new job and the fact of their remarriage doesn't have an impact on the things that are being compensated for. Compensation can still be owed. On the other hand, when somebody is receiving spousal support for non-compensatory reasons, that's the needs and the ability to pay part. Well, when they get a better job or a job at all, or they remarry, the remarriage or the new job or the better paying job may have an impact on their level of need. And if that's the case, then it's possible to say, well, you're not entitled to receive it anymore because now you don't have that need. Something else is meeting that need. Once you are found or agreed to be entitled to receive spousal support, there are two questions that have to get answered. How much gets paid, and for how long does it get paid? These days, those two questions are usually answered using the Spousal Support Advisory Guidelines. The advisory guidelines aren't a law, they're not a regulation, and they've never darkened the doorway of Parliament. Nevertheless, courts across Canada have embraced the advisory guidelines and they are used routinely. The advisory guidelines have two basic formulas. One, when the spouses either have no children or all the children are adult and no support is being paid, and a second set of formulas where there are children for whom support is being paid. Both those formulas can be on the complicated side, and it's safe to say that most of the time you can't do those calculations on the back of a napkin. There are two companies in Canada that sell software to judges and lawyers to perform these calculations, but they don't sell them to the general public. However, one of those companies has a website called mysupportcalculator.ca. The support calculator available there doesn't have all the bells and whistles that the professional product does, but it's good enough to give you a really close idea about the kind of calculation that would be made if a judge or a lawyer made that calculation for you. And finally, as an alternative to paying support on a monthly basis, support can also be paid on a lump sum basis. The important difference between the two is that when support is being paid on a periodic basis, the spousal support is taxable income in the hands of the recipient, just like employment income, but it's tax deductible in the hands of the payor. The payor gets to claim that as a tax deduction in pretty much the same way as you would with an RRSP contribution, right? They both get deducted from your taxable income. Lump sum payments, on the other hand, it's one single payment that is meant to cover the recipient's entire entitlement to support, and it's neither taxable in the hands of the recipient, nor is it tax deductible in the hands of the payor. Lump sum payments are often appealing for payors because it lets them sort of get rid of the obligation all at once. And it's often not appealing for recipients because the chances of getting more support if there's a negative change in circumstances after a lump sum has been paid are really low. On the other hand, if you need a lump sum in order to buy a house or move or something like that, the lump sum can be pretty appealing. And so, that is spousal support in a nutshell. Thank you.